It's all about value-based selling today, acting as a trusted advisor to your client and not pushing just products and product features to your clients and prospects. It's about truly understanding a client's pain points and offer solutions that make their life easier.
When you think about different mindset and approach to what you're doing, what are some themes that you try to keep in mind?
Indicative of the blend between having that solution selling and relationship building dichotomy, we try to operate from an abundance mindset. We always take the approach of we're one handshake, one deal, one cold call away from breakthrough success for our team. So we trust that our consistent daily actions will turn into big wins over time. And we do that by tracking our KPIs on a very granular level, from a quarterly, monthly, down to a daily level of the actions we need to take to see success.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk about mastering modern B2B SaaS sales. Really hoping that you get some practical tips and tactics that you can apply in a sales role. This conversation is hosted by Ideals and by RepVue. So Ideals, if you're not familiar with Ideals, is the fastest growing virtual data room company, SaaS platform, globally, with a team of over 400 people in 30 countries. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how all those teams work together and how you might be able to apply that where you're selling. They've seen very fast growth, over 2x in 4 years. And the sales team has grown at over 3x just for the sales team. My name is Jordan Weinstein, and I'm VP of Business Development at RepVue. And so one of the reasons we're excited about this conversation is that Ideals has an amazing score on RepVue in the top 5%. If you're not familiar with RepVue, RepVue is the fastest growing platform for rating sales orgs. And our goal at RepVue is to bring more transparency to sales so people can make great career decisions. So we have over 12,000 sales orgs rated on RepVue and over 200,000 people from across the world in our community. So really excited to host this conversation, because this conversation really represents a lot of what RepVue is about, which is building a successful sales career. And the most important thing as part of that is actually picking a great team to join. So as I mentioned, our hope today is that gain some useful tactics and techniques for what really works in sales, and we'll address sort of these 3 key topics that you see here. We'll definitely leave some time for Q&A at the end, so please do put those questions in the Q&A section specifically. There's a chat and the Q&A if you see at the bottom of Zoom, so if you can use the Q&A, that'll be most efficient. And we'll just start with a quick round of introductions. So as I said, my name is Jordan Weinstein, VP of Business Development at RepVue, and I'll just ask each panelist to introduce themselves. And then what we'll do is also give a quick turning point in your career or something significant that you would call out. So for me, I've been at RepVue for 3 years. I've been in selling in various startups for over 20 years in direct sales and sales management roles. And I would say the turning point for me was I had the opportunity to lead a team of about 100 people based in London. And when I was there, I was fascinated by some of the cultural differences across different countries, and specifically how those relate to sales, prospecting, deal closing, even practices around emailing and calling. And so I'm excited to talk about some of those today. So let's get into the intros for our panelists then. Santiago, let's start with you.
Hi, Jordan. First of all, thank you very much for having me today. My absolute pleasure to be here. I'm Santiago. I'm Senior Business Development Manager based in Madrid, Spain. I joined Ideals back in 2022 as the first SDR ever globally. Prior to that, I spent several years working in finance, and it was not until my last role that I really discovered my truly passion for sales. It was in private banking that although that it's a financial position, but that has a strong commercial and relationship component that I found pretty exciting.
Great. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. As Jordan, thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to share my insights. So I'm Lisa, and I'm based in the UK. I joined Ideals just over 18 months ago, and I lead the Enablement team, which is a global team helping sales be effective. Before joining Ideal, I was at Deal for about 18 months, and before that at Amazon Ads for about 3 years. Pivotal moment in my career, actually, I would say, was when I joined Deal. It was the first time that I had to really build something from absolute scratch, and that was the enablement function for the SDRs. It was exciting to actually really dive into the issues that the team had and trying to figure out what is the number one thing I need to do and work backwards from that. So it was really, really exciting to be able to build in 18 months a function that actually deliver results.
Great. Jens?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan. And hello, everyone. My name is Jens Hohnwald. I'm Director of Business Development for the EMEA region here at Ideals. I've been working with Ideals for only 4 months, and I've worked in sales throughout my career as individual contributor and as a manager. I have a background in finance. I worked for 15 years in corporate banking before switching to the startup world and joining 2 fintechs in Berlin. My last job before joining Ideals, I worked for an international health insurance startup and scale their global sales team. Pivotal moment in my career was probably when I changed from banking to fintech. And it was just impressive to see the speed of moving, the quick decisions, and the level of impact that you can have as an individual.
Perfect. And last but not least, Brooke, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke LeBlanc. I'm here in New York. I joined Ideals exactly 1 year ago as a business development manager. And I was one of the first field sales hires here in New York because we're expanding our team here on the ground in the United States. Prior to joining Ideals, I started my career out at a virtual data room provider where I met my boss, who I now work with here at Ideals, which is kind of a cool full circle moment. And in between that, during the COVID years, I worked in tech sales at a few venture-backed tech startups.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, let's get into it. I think just to set the context, we're talking about business development today. So what does business development mean? It means lots of different things in different contexts in different countries. Today, we'll talk about business development primarily in the context of sales, or what we might call an account executive role in America. But let's just also give some context to what does business development mean at Ideals. So Jens, why don't you tell us a little bit about that from your perspective?
Yeah, at Ideals, it basically means outbound sales. It's a 360 closing role for new business. And we mostly focus on face-to-face meetings with our target companies rather than on pure phone sales, for example. It's very comparable to the account executive that you mentioned.
Perfect. Okay. So with that in mind, then, the business development role we know has transformed significantly in recent years. The economy, global cycles have gone through several different phases. And to sort of kick us off today, let's talk about this specific moment. So what is a critical skill or a mindset that might have been a little bit less important 5 years ago, but is now really essential and really on the forefront? So Jens, I know you've recently made several hires to your team in Germany, which is growing. So let's talk a little bit about that from your perspective. Tell us what you think about that critical skill for business development today.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Jordan. The role of a modern sales rep has changed to some degree. It's all about value-based selling today, acting as a trusted advisor to your client and not pushing just products and product features to your clients and prospects. So it's about truly understanding a client's pain points and offer solutions that make their life easier. And as you said, I've been hiring for my team in Frankfurt. I've had 3 hires already. I'm still looking for more talents. And when I interview, I focus on something that I call a real sales mindset. So I look for someone who's smart, adaptable, sociable. And for me, attitude and mindset matter much more than just deep industry knowledge, for example, because that you can always learn. I'm also looking for coachability, people willing to learn, grow, and take feedback. That's especially important in the fast-changing SaaS environment. And in the end, every salesperson really brings their own personality and style. And that's very often exactly why they succeed. So we at Ideals, we don't want a team of identical sellers. Instead, it's really about supporting each individual to create their own impact.
Perfect. Santiago, tell us what you think about it. What's a critical skill or mindset to be successful in sales?
Well, aside from several skills like having a hunter mentality, being resilient, and not letting radio get you down, I will highlight willingness to adapt as a must-have nowadays. As we all know, in SaaS, things change pretty fast. So curiosity, experimentation, and feedback, I consider absolutely key. I'm also a strong believer of A/B testing. If it's in whether it's in the way you do cold calling, your emails, the way you run meetings, or even how you push for the contract signed, I honestly consider it's one of the best ways to start figuring out what really clicks. And also, it's important to do it consistently because potentially what worked 8 months ago might not work so well today.
Interesting. I know we mentioned early on, I think Jens mentioned that deals, there's a lot of face-to-face selling. And then you talked about A/B testing, which, is easy to imagine in the context of like emails or something. But can you give us an example of sort of A/B testing in more of a face-to-face capacity?
Yeah, sure. For example, recently, a couple of months ago, I have started testing sending breakfast packages to strategic prospects, clients. For example, a thank you gesture after a meeting or after I won the first deal. And honestly, it's working much better than I initially thought. Also, it's true that if I'm honest, I like to do things in person. So if I can, I will meet the champion or prospect directly. I will hand it over myself and use that moment to build relationship.
Great. That's interesting. Thank you. Brooke, tell us your thoughts on a critical skill or mindset.
Yes, I'll just add on to everyone else's points because I agree that I think a lot of these foundational skills, the people skills, are very transferable to what we do at a day-to-day level at a sales org. We operate in New York with a very high-touch, white-glove sales process, so relationships are everything for us. There are different options out there in the market for clients to choose from, so we like to differentiate from a seller's point of view. So we like to build our personal brand, and then we also do a lot of both cold outreach and in-person meetings. So our day-to-day is kind of a mix. Usually in the mornings we do emails, internal calls, and then in the afternoons we're out in the fields, shaking hands, meeting people.
Great. And then would you say, when you think about sort of different mindset and approach to what you're doing, like what are sort of some themes that you try to keep in mind?
Yeah, so indicative of the blend between having that solution selling and relationship building dichotomy, those two kind of key skill sets, we try to operate from an abundance mindset, meaning that we always take the approach of we're one handshake, one deal, one cold call away from breakthrough success for our team. So we are constantly trying to trust that our consistent daily actions will turn into big wins over time. And we do that by tracking our KPIs on a very granular level. So we could break it down from a quarterly, monthly, down to a daily level of kind of the actions we need to take to see success.
Interesting. All right. Well, I like the abundance mindset concept, so we'll get back to that for sure. Lisa, what's your thought here? What is a kind of a critical skill or mindset that you look for in sales?
Well, I'd like to summarize that into one word. For me, it's all about tenacity, which kind of summarizes everything that's been said so far. It's like, you have to take ownership of the goals you want to achieve. It's about taking ownership of a relationship, cultivating over time, never letting go, and making sure that you sort of keep track of what you need to do in a granular level, like if you need to follow up, if you need to show up, if you need to just keep in touch. That's important to do. Ultimately, it's about working towards a goal, not just in terms of selling, but in terms of helping customers achieve their own solutions.
Okay. All right. So let's dig into some of the answers that you guys gave and sort of get to the next level there. So Santiago, you said sending breakfast or sort of a personalized touch to your outreach. How do you, it's easy to imagine doing that on a one-by-one basis, but then there's also obviously, sales is a numbers game to a large extent. So how do you take that concept of creativity and make it efficient with scale?
Sure, Jordan. I understand your point and I completely agree, honestly, but this kind of hyper-personalized outreach will be reserved only for strategic prospects. Uh, of course, it can be challenging to maintain this level of creativity at scale. And I think honestly that marketing support here is key to help us scale such initiatives. For example, I remember during Christmas a few months ago, writing over 40 letters, handwritten letters paired with bottles of wine to send to prospect clients. So a lot of manual work. So I think that marketing support here is key to help us scale.
Okay. No, that's a great point. I think one of the things we see on RepVue, teams that rank very highly in culture and leadership tend to have a lot of cross-team collaboration. So I love that example of sort of marketing support. I'm curious how that plays out globally for you, Jens. What's your perspective on that sort of cross-team collaboration from the German team?
Yeah, I can connect to what Santiago and Lisa said. I believe sales is a team sport, and at Ideals, we have a lot of support for our sales reps from different sources. We work hand in hand with marketing and sales enablement. Sales enablement is in charge of the tools we use and the sales processes, the coachings, the trainings, the playbooks, and then marketing helps us to identify targets, our ideal customer profile, and also helps us with content for client interaction, which is a big enabler for us.
Makes sense. So then I think we have to get Lisa's perspective. So from a sales enablement perspective, as Jens mentioned, critical to the success of the team. What would you say when you look from that perspective is kind of the most significant gap you see between successful BDMs and those who might sort of struggle more to adapt to the sales environment?
Yes, that's for me. When I look at sort of the role of a seller, I look at two things. There's two sides. There's the creative side, so the one that engages with the prospect, the one that keeps relationships, so that has a sort of in-person meetings, connect, and a kind of personal side of the seller. That tends to be quite down to the individual and what your personality is like. And then there is the other side, which is the operational side. And that, I think, is something that can certainly be learned. And it takes a little bit of discipline to learn, to follow steps, to make sure that you keep on top, you don't miss a beat. And that's the part that certainly sales enablement can help a lot. We can actually help from both sides. But I think building a foundation of being a great seller is someone that follows a particular pattern, a workflow, even a particular mindset that is organized. And that is what I've seen over the years being the difference between sort of good sellers and great sellers. And great sellers always have a methodology, a pattern that they follow consistently, and they're able to adapt that with the creative side to the prospect they have in mind and they're dealing with. So I think for me, it's getting the right balance between the creative side and making sure that you have solid operational foundations to your approach.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So we're talking obviously about tactics that can help people be successful in sales. We've talked a lot about face-to-face selling, but honestly, I think we may have set a record for sales conversations in 2025 where we've gone 15 minutes without discussing. No one said AI, which I think is really interesting. So I'll be the first, and let's talk about it. In a world where there's so much automation and focus on timing, how do you see successful BDMs using tools like CRM, obviously, but also especially AI tools in meaningful ways? So Jens, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at this point, almost everyone is using AI in some way or form. And if you're not, then you're probably already at a disadvantage. So that said, there's a lot of noise in the market. And the real question is which tools actually move the needle, which tools make a difference and improve your impact, improve your outreach. And for us at Ideals, AI plays a key role in automating workflows, but also in generating deeper insights into our customer profiles, our target customer profiles. It helps us identifying buying signals and spot opportunities, for example. But ultimately, from my point of view, it's the combination of smart automation with the help of AI and human connection that drives success in sales. So you will not be able to replace the human element. But I can give you an example on how AI tools help. At Ideas, we work with a tool called Market, and it helps us, automate a lot of our email sequences, social media interactions on LinkedIn, for example. And it also has an AI co-pilot, and that really analyzes buying signals of your defined prospect or target clients. And it creates custom alarms about, people's social media activity, events that they attended, interests they have, recent job changes. And bottom line, it's just a shortcut for you to get better information and eventually an easier entry point to start a meaningful conversation.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So sort of a top funnel, mid funnel tool in that context to help you be more aware. Interesting. All right. So let's kind of that's a good transition into talking about sort of pipeline. Everybody likes to focus on closing deals, but let's go up the funnel a bit and talk about pipeline. If you had to focus on just one lead gen strategy for the next quarter, what would that be and why? So Brooke, let's start with you.
Yes, one lead gen strategy that'd be really helpful for our territory is to focus on volume and really lean into getting in front of your book of business. We're still in the first year of our entire reps here in New York. And also we have a market in Chicago in the US activated now. So it's super important for us because, for example, we split up the territories and I have probably about 3,000 individuals to meet, get in front of, make sure I know their name and they know my name. So in order for us to be able to attack, we use all sorts of tools, anywhere from Zoom info. We just are sampling. Right now, we're trying out Gong for our team. We use LinkedIn heavily in order to prospect. And then good old traditional email, whatever email client you prefer, we use Gmail. And then a lot of just in-person converting all of that kind of front work to be able to go out in the field, get in front of individuals. So it's a lot of just like building your book of business, understanding the folks at your account deck, and then going out and building those relationships and doing that high-touch sales like we mentioned earlier.
Okay, got it. So volume, but also relationships and high touch.
Volume at
Finding
first.
the balance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. All right, Lisa, what do you think?
Well, if I look at the operational side of things, so when it comes to the very top of funnel, so the lead generation part, it's always a tricky one to get right. And I see, I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn that talk a lot about top of funnel, and it looks like it's an area where there isn't a one solution fits all, and actually there isn't a tool that will solve the problem. It's about actually thinking strategically about the problem you're trying to solve. It's like, what are you actually looking to develop? How many people do you want to engage? What is the right volume? What is the right way to engage with them? We engage with them in person. So how many people can you actually, realistically engage and keep in touch with and meet in person? So for me, it's about one of our priorities right now is to think about what is the structure of the very top of funnel. Apart from the tools, the workflows, is about where do we want our sellers to spend their time? When you obviously in-person meetings takes a lot of time. So any solutions that we can come up with that actually reduces time for our sellers to spend behind the screen, looking to generate leads, that is gonna get us more time for them to spend in front of customers. So looking at solutions is something I'm really excited about to hopefully try solutions like Clay that can actually do that automation at scale, that can generate that first touch. So we haven't tested yet. As Jan said, we currently use an Apple Market. We're using other tools like Apollo to SaaS Navigator, of course, but they still create some clunkiness to the process. They still need a lot of time spent doing prospecting. So the next stage for us would be how do we minimize that so we can build speed into the process.
Got it. Okay. And let's talk specifically then about lead generation, which Lisa touched on. Jens, what do you think is a strategy or approach on that side that you find really effective in your market?
Yeah, it's an important area. I think we've heard it repeatedly today already, and for me it's very clear. Hyper personalization consistently outperforms pure volume. Yeah, so it's not about sending hundreds or thousands of generic messages. What works is really the relevance and context. And that's also where tools and AI come into play, right? My example from earlier, if someone has raised a funding round, attended a specific event, shown interest in a trend on social media, then your outreach should reflect that. And one additional approach that's been working very well for us is client engagement with content. We host M&A community events and also share regular market insights in forms of newsletters. And by showing expertise and offering a genuine value upfront, we make it much easier to start meaningful conversations. And at the same time, high activity levels in sales are still non-negotiable. That's really my view. Momentum comes from consistent action, And the more quality conversations you initiate, the more opportunities you create. And that's what ultimately leads to closed deals.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So use AI to give you the topics to discuss, but you can't just set your AI robot loose to do the actual selling for you, it sounds like. Not yet, at least. All right. All right. Santiago, what do you think? How about you?
Well, I honestly think that you should always run several tactics in parallel. And of course, it really depends on the industry you are in. For me, one of the most universal strategies is analyzing what your competitors are doing, copy what works, and then go one step further and differentiate yourself. For example, in Spain, our main competitors host large events with around 100 attendees from all seniority levels and industries. So we decided to take a different approach to be more target events tailored to specific industries such as real estate, renewable energy, private equity, and so on, and seniority levels. So around 40 attendees with a stronger focus on networking, and has worked pretty well for us, leading to several deals post-event.
Okay. All right. So if I had to kind of distill the conversation into sort of two themes, I think people have mentioned on the one side, sort of tools and technology, enabling you to be hyper-personalized, as Jens mentioned, and to be as specific as possible. And then the other theme people have mentioned is, just kind of horsepower and volume to get to as many prospects as possible. So obviously it's a combination of those two things, but, just to sort of maybe embrace debate a bit in terms of trade-offs, what would you say in this modern time, if you had to pick kind of hyper-personalization or focus on numbers and volume, you had to kind of fall on one side or the other, which would you choose? Brooke, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'd phase the strategy out, and this is targeted for New York. The first year that an individual AE, SDR, BDM, just the first year that any sales individual is on an account deck, I would say go for volume. Get your name out there, get to know your account decks. There's so many different firms that we're looking to cover. There's so much turnover in the investment banking space, so about 20% year over year turnover at the junior level. And then once you have your ground under your feet, so to speak, and you have some sort of a track record to see like what accounts are you more sticky in, where do we have more existing business you can leverage. Once you have more data points, I would say go deep in the accounts where your product resonates, where you have the most product traction, where you can identify your champions. So I believe, at least what I've seen so far, because we're a pretty new market for iDeals, I would say just go with the flow, start wide, and then go deep and go targeted over time.
I like that. Interesting. Okay. Lisa, how about you? Which side of that debate would you fall on in terms of volume versus personalization and relationships?
Well, I would have to be on the other side, mostly because I'm actually a great fan of personalization. I think that starting with and cold, to always start with something that is relevant. So we know that standard messages, sort of spray and pray, like don't actually build those foundations long term. Data is very clear about that at scale. So being able to spend a little bit of time at the beginning to really get to understand your prospect, understand what is likely important for them. So having this hypothesis of based on what I can see, what I'm reading, the type of company, your position, what I can understand about you on social media, like LinkedIn in particular, about information that I can gather even from sort of annual reports about the company. What is the priority for the company? What is likely the priority for them? And also use our understanding of the market, working with thousands of companies that have similar pain points. So using this information to actually hit where there is an opportunity to be relevant and then build from there. So personalization for me is key. Time to go deep from the outset so you can open the door, which is, we know, data when it comes to sort of response rates are very low. So the more relevant you are, the more you can stand out, the higher the chances of response.
Okay, got it. No, that's great. So I think that was a good conversation about really sort of tools and tactics, kind of getting into the level of detail. Let's take it up a few levels and talk about something that everybody is interested in, which is culture, specifically sales culture. So this is a topic that we're really interested in at RepVue. We've got, as I mentioned, over 12,000 sales orgs that are rated in our platform. And so we have a lot of opinions about what we've seen that actually works to build a good sales org, which is a broad question, of course. I have some specific thoughts on this that I'll kind of save till the end of this section. But before I do, I would love to really hear what the group thinks about specifically the balance of a healthy sales culture with the pressure to perform. So you guys are a high-performing sales org from what we see from your team's ratings on RepVue. And not only are you a high-performing org, but you're selling into finance, which historically is kind of a high-pressure environment, I think, is how most people see it. So I'm curious how you would think about sort of balancing those two factors of a healthy sales culture and also pressure to perform. Jens, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think you don't have to choose between performance and culture. It's quite the opposite. I think best teams, best sales teams achieve targets because they have a strong culture. Sales is emotional, and you win as a team, as we discussed also earlier. But it's also important that you are fully results oriented. So to use an old football metaphor, it doesn't matter how many meters you run or how much you sweat. What matters is how many goals you score. So you should really also focus on the results, which is really key, and don't overcomplicate the sales process. And lastly, a strong culture is also what gives you the safety to try new things and take risks. And even when you fail, and you're allowed to fail in your culture and your organization, then you will grow into a stronger person and a better sales rep as a result.
Okay, I like it. Santiago, how about you?
Well, I think there are few departments that are as impacted by the company culture as much as sales. I mean, obviously, we all have targets to hit, and I think that all will have to take ownership of that. But when you have someone who really knows what needs to be done, who brings a proven process, but still gives you the freedom to try new things, and who takes a long-term supported approach, I think it changes everything. For example, back in 2022, when I joined as the first SDR ever for Ideals globally, my manager back then became a real mentor to me with a long-term mindset, always guiding me and helping me to close more deals. I was able to witness the growth from the very beginning, supporting new team members as they joined in Spain. And then, as you know, the company then decided to scale the role, and now we have SDRs in London, New York, Chicago, Sao Paulo, and keep expanding further.
Okay, great. Let's see. So, Brooke, tell us your thoughts on this from a sales culture perspective.
Yes. So overall, Ideals is a very data-driven company. We operate with, in the sales organization, as you can imagine, KPIs and quotas, like folks have mentioned, and our team follows our VP as our leader who sets our mission and objectives, and that comes from top down. So Ideals goal, the United States, and then for us, New York. But then we get to, as reps, be creative on the strategy of how we achieve those missions and carry that out. So I think that flexibility allows us to have a really healthy company culture. And like Santiago said, we can fail and we can fail fast and we can learn from our mistakes and just take those reps, and ultimately we'll improve over time. But that kind of flexibility and autonomy over our account deck allows us to create our own destiny and then own the outcome as a result.
Nice. Interesting. Lisa, how about you?
Well, when I look at culture and goals, for me, it's always causing the sort of tension that goes between short term and long term. So it's very easy to focus on the short term and think like, okay, I need to hit my objectives, I need to hit my target, my KPIs. And as Brooke said, we are a data-driven company, so we like to keep track of everything. And so it's very easy to just focus on that for the quarter, for the year. But actually, when you look at a sort of culture, you tend to think, okay, this is a very short, very long-term thing. It's about the big picture. It's about all the speeches. Actually, it's not. It's what you do every day. The small little habits that you build in your day-to-day that still connect with your weekly monthly, quarterly KPIs, but they actually make a difference. So as I said earlier, I love an operational approach to sales because it helps build that accountability. And that accountability is not just in terms of the actions that you do to your prospects, it's also what you do internally. It's about how do I look at what that person is doing in the short, sort of in the short, in kind of a small little thing that I can possibly imitate, that I can, or what I can share. It's about celebrating success. It's about understanding what we are doing on the day-to-days that we can share with one another. So we're a remote company, and as such, it's not the same as being in the same office where it's easy to see what's happening, hear what people are saying. You actually have to do it differently. So sharing what you're doing, celebrating success of others. And as a company, we do it by celebrating success all the time. And actually quite excited to say that only last week, my team won an award, and it was so unexpected. We did projects, we worked towards outcomes. And then when it came to actually look at the results, then it was clear that the work we had done had actually generated a very strong impact on the overall sales success. So that actually was a really great win for Enablement, particularly it's something that we're not very used to celebrated by. We tend to be called in when things don't work out. So it was really great to actually see that our team is really part of the overall sales success. And this actually, I think, is what ultimately brings and builds a strong culture.
For sure. Congratulations. That's a great example. I think so. I wanted to share my thoughts on this because, you know, at RepVue, we literally see sales reps' opinions about thousands of sales orgs, and culture is one of the most common things that people look at that's brought up. And culture means a lot of different things to different people in different companies. But one of the conclusions I would say that we've come to, or strongly held opinions, is that in a sales org, the leadership's most important job as it relates to culture is just supporting the team in hitting quota. So building a team in an environment where they can hit quota is, I would say, actually the number one contributor to culture that I've seen. So it's rare to see a sales team that is not hitting quota that says it has a great culture. And conversely, it's rare to see a team with a great culture, a truly great culture that isn't hitting quota. So globally, a lot of people don't realize globally at the data we collect at RepVue, we see about 40% of a typical team hitting quota. And when I look at the RepVue profile for ideals, at least in terms, according to our data, it looks like over 70% of the team is hitting quota. So really impressed by that. Really love to see that, especially in what it sounds like is a truly sort of remote first environment, a remote company, and obviously remote sales, field sales. I think that also brings a different sort of spin to the culture. How do you support that culture when there's lots of distributed teams and people out in the field selling and selling remote first? I think, during the pandemic, a lot of jobs, of course, were remote, but now it's actually rare to find kind of that remote company environment to sell in, even though a lot of sellers want that. So I'd be curious, actually, to touch on that, drill down into that specifically. What do you think it is about the ideals culture that kind of supports that model and also enables the teams to be as successful as they are? Jens, give us your perspective. You're relatively new, but in the few months that you've been leading the team there, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we've heard a couple of examples from Brooke and Lisa already. I think it's crucial if you're globally distributed, a remote first company, that you have this very open feedback culture and coaching. If you don't do that, you just manage by numbers, and teams like that rarely outperform. We have this truly global culture, and on a normal day at Ideals, you will work with colleagues from Germany, New York, Sao Paulo, and Madrid. So this is completely normal. This is also the idea that Ideals have of attracting the best talents. Of course, sales and outbound sales, field sales, is attached to a certain location where our clients are. But when it comes to that, then the mix is just super important, right? So I meet my team probably 2 days a week in a co-working. The team as such of salespeople, they have almost daily meetings with their clients at the financial centers in this world. And one key point is giving people the resources and the tools to feel empowered. We are no micromanagers. We want people to find their own solutions, to empower them, to have an impact. And then, of course, very importantly, what Lisa also pointed out, to celebrate the wins.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to do a quick lightning round, and then I just noticed that we have a ton of questions in the Q&A, which is awesome. Really appreciate everyone's participation. But I love this last question that we have, which is if you could give a piece of advice to sort of your younger self at the beginning of your sales career, and you only had 30 seconds to do it, what would that be? Lisa, let's start with you.
Wow, 30 seconds. For me, it's about being more critical about what I know and what I don't know. So it's about not make assumptions that I actually know the answers all the time, and really question my own assumptions and look at the data and really be true to the data and work backwards from the problem I'm looking to solve. So creating that associations between problem and solution a lot quicker using the data.
Perfect. Brooke, how about you? What advice would you give?
A good answer. So following up on that, I'll add that what you do is who you are, to quote Ben Horowitz. The stronger lifestyle habits you develop in your personal life will directly translate to your professional life, especially in sales when there can be no off switch.
Nice. Okay, Jens?
I would circle back to the culture component. Don't just look at the commission plan, pay attention to the environment you're stepping into, look for real signs of the culture, of the real teamwork, of coaching, of structured onboarding, because that's what sets you apart for long-term success, not just the size of the initial bonus.
Great. And Santiago?
I will say never underestimate the importance of the setup when you are doing cold calling, because you really have to get into that actor mode. And also I will recommend currently to go for walks without your phone for a 15-20 minutes walk just to clear your mind. And also many good ideas have come to me during a walk.
And I'll throw that's great advice. And I'll throw one in there. It might be a little bit boring, but it's a really practical one, which is not to fall for the OTE trap. We haven't mentioned OTE, on target earnings, but it's one of the main things we see at RepVue, which is people tend to be attracted by big numbers of OTE, but really doesn't matter if the team that you're looking at isn't hitting quota. So focus on quota attainment before OTE. So great. All right, well, let's get into Q&A. We have about 15 minutes and we have a lot of questions, which is great. So let's start. Oh, this is an interesting one. So question is, when hiring, how can you, we talked about relationship building. How can you objectively assess relationship building skills in a salesperson during the interview process? Jens, what are your thoughts on that as somebody who's doing active interviews right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have a multi-step interview process at Ideals, and especially for the sales roles, we want to see the sales reps in action before we can exactly assess that. So we work with role plays and presentations of hypothetical situations. And in my opinion, this is the best way to really see how somebody excels in a client situation, doing a discovery, presenting someone. Of course, you get a briefing before. You don't have to sell our product without any knowledge. And it's more about the style and how you interact as a person, how you find information, how you solve a problem, how you structure information, and that's been really key in our hiring process.
Okay. All right, we're going to jump to a different question. Some people asked about the abundance mindset topic that Brooke brought up. So Brooke, I think if people are interested, do you have like a book or podcast or something specific that people can dive into to sort of hear more about that, and specifically even in the context of sales?
Yes, I have 2 book recommendations. The first one is called The Power of One More by Ed Milet, and the second one is called Sell It Like Serhant by Ryan Serhant, and I'll drop those in the chat.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, let's grab another one here. Okay, this is an interesting one. So we talked about advice at the beginning of somebody's career, but specifically to like an SDR or BDR who's interviewing and doesn't have any sales experience. So this is obviously someone who's looking to get into sales. What advice would you have for somebody who is in that environment? And Santiago, do you have any tips there?
Well, if you haven't worked in sales before, I will recommend you. There's a lot of content on YouTube of really good on YouTube, of several books like The Challenger Sale. And also I would like to learn to find a good seller that their potential is in the team or in another region, and try to learn as much as you can from them. Yeah.
Jens, you want to chime in on that one as well for sort of those early career folks?
Yeah, I mean, also referring to the reply to the very first question, I think especially at Ideals, we're not looking for the perfect salesperson with a perfect track record, especially for the junior position. Sometimes you find people who like to be in sales, who think they like to be in sales, but they don't have any experience. And by being this kind of, adaptable, sociable, and showing this quality in the interview process, not specifically to Ideals, I think your interviewers will also see that you have these talents, right? Because again, it's not about deep industry knowledge and researching the whole night before you interview. It's really about connecting with people, selling yourself, right? Really pitching ideas and being successful at convincing people. And then I agree with Santiago. There are a lot of sources nowadays that you can easily access with ChatGPT, with YouTube, with social channels. Cold calling is of course a big topic. How can you be successful with cold calling? What works? What doesn't? You have the medic sales methodology. You have the challenger style. So these you can find in a Google search or ChatGPT search very quickly, and then see if it's for you.
Okay. So this is an interesting question. I like this one. So, Lisa, you talked about, your focus is sales enablement, right? So Ideals has invested in you and your team to help with sales enablement, which speaks to sort of, the culture and support aspects that we talked about. But what if somebody is in a startup, maybe with fewer resources or a less built out team than Ideals, and they don't necessarily have those support teams in the same way that Ideals has invested in them? How would you recommend that a small team, or maybe even an individual, kind of try to do some of that sales enablement type of activity, but without all of the support and resources that you guys have at Ideals? What would be kind of a couple things or a couple tools that you would suggest they prioritize?
Well, as from a sales enablement team, when we started, we didn't have anything. We didn't have an LMS. We didn't have anything. So, and at the same time, we had people to onboard. And this was actually a similar challenge that I had in my previous role. We didn't have anything to start with. So we had to be really clever and inventive about how to solve that problem. So one of the things we came up with is using you can just use Word document. We had Notion at the time. That was a resource. So we built a whole workflow in Notion with pictures, videos, and everything, which you can do even using Google Meet. So you don't need resources. I built an entire onboarding program on G Site, for example. It worked really well. We engineered a little bit to create a bit of ability there, pictures, videos again, and then linked it to just external documents. So it worked for what we wanted to do. Of course, it was a lot of manual work, but you don't need a lot of complicated tools to get your enablement set up. And also, there's a lot of free resources as a seller if you want to enable yourself to continue learning, that you can find on even just following people on LinkedIn that share their own tips. So even circulating those can help just creating a momentum of learning or a culture of learning that goes back to that sharing, to learning from one another. So you absolutely don't need a huge investment upfront to scale up.
Okay. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit. A question from Shahir. I like this question. I think it's interesting, an interesting perspective to think about, which is product-led sales versus, I guess, sales-led sales, right? To give some context for that, typically in a product-led sales environment, the sort of product starts the process, if you will, whether it's with a free trial or giving some access such that the prospect can get a feel for the value, and then maybe sales comes in somewhere in the middle of the process or further towards the end to close the deal or negotiate. Give us a sense for how that concept applies at Ideals and kind of what your thoughts are on that balance. Whoever wants to take that one.
Well, I can go in this one because I find it really interesting. For example, in our cases, it's true that we used to offer trials, but sometimes you don't have the prospect getting to a platform and really trying it. So, for example, something that we did in Spain around a year ago, a year and a half, is that we created in our product, we uploaded content that adds value to our prospects, and we invite them to the platform. So they have to sign in order to access all that content that is going to be relevant for them. So they didn't do a full discovery potentially of the platform, but they at least get that idea.
Okay, interesting. There's a couple questions. So let's see, Brooke. Someone asked, it sounds like you have experience in the VDR space at a couple different companies, but then recently you made the switch to Ideals. What was it that kind of drew you to Ideals in that decision?
Yeah, so many variables. Well, first off, I knew my boss. So it's amazing to work for someone that you respect, you trust, and you have a long working history with. Second off, I had a really good interview process. So I met a bunch of great folks at Ideals to get recruited over. The company culture, and I looked up things like the RepVue score was very helpful in order to look at things from a quantitative perspective, but from a qualitative perspective, Ideals is just a really effective remote sales org. And the thing with having worked in this industry before, like my kind of unfair advantage, if you will, is that I already had an existing client base. And then I'm taking kind of that experience that I've had previously and translating that to an organization where I get to have a much bigger impact because we're building out our team from scratch. I was Devin, my boss, our VP's first hire here in New York. So that ability to work for kind of a larger established organization like Ideals that's been around for almost 2 decades, if I'm being generous, if we're rounding up here. But then our New York field sales team has only been around for now 1 year. I really like that dichotomy and that balance between kind of a startup, like fail fast, experimental environment, and then also the mix of like an established company with all the resources, all the tools at your disposal. Yeah. So that was just the long and the short of it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so one last question that we'll kind of close on. This is an interesting one. Jens, you talked about sort of volume, and I think your quote was something like it, high volume is sort of non-negotiable when you look at the sales process. But then obviously we've also talked about kind of a flexible culture. How do you kind of balance that in terms of KPIs for like hitting specific targets, whether it's calls or meetings and that sort of thing, versus obviously at the end of the day, you have a number to hit. How does that work for you personally and at Ideals? How would you describe that part of the environment?
Yeah, I think what I said is the high activity level is what keeps you going as a sales rep. I mean, personally, in terms of motivation, but also in terms of success, and it's just an old kind of rule that is still valid. That the high level of activity will get you to the success, to the leads, to the successes, and of course it becomes more and more important to have high quality engagement. So I definitely distance myself from high volume identical generic outreach. It's actually with that it's quite the opposite, because you're burning your leads, right? They spam you and you can't contact them again. So it's really about high quality, high activity level, and a high activity level can be a high activity level with a bunch of clients. For us, as I mentioned, it's a lot of advisory, being the trusted advisor, solving problems versus selling product features. So we engage in this M&A community that I mentioned. We provide information, updates in the M&A market. We host events, and that is how we create these relationships. And in terms of how do we manage KPIs? Of course, we look at the high activity levels because we think that's the way to the success. So of course we look for meetings, for a certain structure that we provide to help sales reps also to get to this path of success. But overall is the result. So if you win, you win. It doesn't matter how you get there. If you win your deals, you must be right.
I love it. All right. Well, that is a great sentiment to kind of wrap us up on, and a great takeaway for the audience. So we'll wrap up there. But I think as a takeaway to think about for all the people attending, I think if you are looking for a remote environment or in a remote company, Ideals is a great example of that for a sales environment. But also with a sales process that emphasizes in-person interactions, which is a really cool balance, I think. That's one of the things that I've taken from this conversation. I'm sure there's many more takeaways that people could learn as well. But thanks so much to all the panelists for the energy, for the insights, for the experiences and stories that you've shared, and also to the audience for your collaboration and the questions. The list of questions were so many that we probably only got to about a third of them, but we'll send out a recording of this, and also we'll try to address some of those questions that we haven't answered. I think we'll do a post that'll go up on the Ideals blog, so look for that there. But also let's keep this conversation going. Definitely reach out, whether it's to me or to any of our panelists on LinkedIn, and don't forget to look at RepVue as well. So RepVue, I mentioned our mission is really to bring more transparency to sales, to help people find a really fulfilling sales career, whether it's at Ideals or at other great sales orgs out there. And let's keep building strong sales cultures that win together. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.